up with some leading questions. All right.
I've been forgetting to do my little categories so we can play the game. I keep forgetting.
And you don't have a game today?
Let me see. I got a category. You got a game?
No, I don't. But I'll come up with something while Thandie is talking, because we also got to talk about
Oh,
Justice Jackson as well.
yes. Okay, so we got a couple of things though. Thandie, I was looking for your geopolitical kind of perspective. One, I do think that we need to
I'll tell you where you can get the geopolitical perspective. You don't have to have mine, but if you
okay,
could.
so listen though. Okay, so
Mhm.
hey everybody, I'm Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade, hanging out here in Muskogee territory, which is also unceded land to the United States and is called the Atlanta, Georgia. So we are talking about several things today. We'll get to our main discussion, but I do want to acknowledge something that is historic, and we'll see how it goes. We got a Supreme Court nominee for the first time in United States history. That's a sister. Yay!
Yeah.
I don't know. I have kind of mixed feelings. I mean, of course, I went and looked at her record, and so then I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But anything that has to do with just the justice system in this country always still makes me skeptical. I wonder how y'all are feeling about having a black woman nominated to the Supreme Court. Tony, I knew you was gonna be like, nah.
Thandie, go first. You go first.
Well, first of all, she's a nominee. She hasn't been confirmed. She hasn't been seated. She has not weighed in on any decisions of importance to Black life. We happy because it's a sister with locks and one of them hard to pronounce names. All it is a nomination. That's all it is a nomination. We got to stop getting happy. She ain't even got the job yet. Now, a sister who I do appreciate and respect, Nkechi Taifa,
Mhm.
attorney Nkechi Taifa out of Washington, D.C., gave her analysis of Ketanji Jackson. That was initially, I think that more has come to light on her background and her decisions. So I think that as the Senate and others do their vetting, quote unquote, and I say that because they've probably already vetted her, I think that we need to do our vetting. We need to not just get happy because somebody is nominated. A black person was nominated years ago by the name of Clarence Thomas. We see how that has fared. So if we want a person with progressive or leftist views on the court, we need to get behind that person and show these senators and these congresspeople this is who we want. You better confirm them, or let's just not be so happy because someone is nominated. That's first of all. But second of all, as I said, different things are coming to light about her background. Lockheed Martin was a case in which um, there's a judge. I'm not sure if he's in Florida or Georgia or where he is now. I want to say his name is Clemens. Y'all have to forgive me. My memory is getting to where it ain't what it used to be. But he wrote a letter strongly urging President Biden and others to consider other nominees for the Supreme Court because in this particular case of black employees at Lockheed Martin, she is said to have sided with Lockheed Martin against the black employees in a racial discrimination lawsuit. So if this is true, and if this is, first of all, is it true? Second of all, is it an anomaly, or is it how she usually is it is it the type of decision she usually makes? These are the kinds of things that we need to know. So, like, no, I'm not impressed, and I'm just not impressed in general because it's a nomination. So,
So that's interesting that you say that because I think analysis is important and critical thinking skills are important. And I
hmm
see that kind of lacking
hmm
because I think there are situations where you can look at, and I don't know, I haven't read the case. I'm not a legal scholar at all, but there are cases where you can make decisions and it can seem like you are siding with one side or the other, but people don't have all of the information, and there's not a critical analysis. So
Mhm.
I am sure in my lifetime as a psychologist that someone could look at something and say, well, you sided with, this person, or you put a police officer back to work, or you did something, and they might see that as problematic, but they don't know have all the facts to the case. And so I try to be really careful when I start getting out of my lane, which Dr. McCray always reminds us, you be in somebody else's lane and trying to tell them how they should do their job.
And the other thing, though, after we do regardless of how much of our background work and homework we do, the United States Constitution is a fundamentally anti-Black document. It is the foundation. Its foundation, as well as the foundation of the United States, is fundamentally anti-Black. And everyone, whether it's Barack Obama or Kamala Harris or Ketanji Jackson or whoever, take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And the Supreme Court is the highest body in the land. They're going to uphold white supremacy. Bottom line, they're going to uphold it until we are able to get a real-time, show enough, ain't playing spook who gonna get up there for life, like 30, 40 years old with no health problems whatsoever, get on that court and just be like, I'm here, you're gonna have to take me out. I don't know how we're gonna fare, but that's just my opinion.
What's the rest? And I don't want us to get stuck on this, but the rest of y'all, what are your thoughts about Judge Ketanji Jackson? I hope I said her name right. Ketanji, I think that is Jackson being nominated for the Supreme Court.
Well, I'll say this, and I always feel like I'm not the apologist, but I am, I guess, the realist about the way our government is set up, right? We have 3 smooth branches of government. And right now, we down 6-3. And I feel
down bad.
we down bad. And so what I'm saying for the things that are immediately in front of the Supreme Court, voting rights, reproductive rights, marriage rights. We act like when things are settled, we think that, okay, gay marriage is legal. You act like they can't roll that back one more again, right? Same thing with marriage rights, for racial, like if now somebody wants to say white and Black people can't marry, there are some places where they're going to try to test that. And if you have a Supreme Court, if they kick it up, just like Loving versus Virginia, that made interracial marriage illegal, if you kick that up enough, and you have a Supreme Court that says, oh, you know what? Negroes don't need to be marrying no one else. Then they can literally roll that back. So we're talking about rolling back abortion rights, and they've done it in states. They've kicked it up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has kicked it back down, but we're acting like it can't go back. And so anytime somebody to save their own life, to make decisions, and we act like right behind that is not birth control, which it is. And you have to be very careful because you see the way people are talking in Texas. Well, birth control, just early abortion. Sir, they're not pregnant, right? Like you're trying to prevent people from being, so all these men who are saying, oh, we can't teach anybody about sex. Can't teach them about gay sex or any other kind of sex. We're going to ban books. We're going to ban abortion. Now we're going to ban birth control. And all of that is who is on the Supreme Court. And what we do know is that Amy Coney Barrett, all the Republicans, they're going to vote one way. So what I do know is that Ketanji is not, right? If she's put on there. And I do know Sotomayor, who people don't give enough credit for holding it down and having literal, has to come out with the left position on everything. Like, y'all insane. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, why y'all doing this? Like, literally every single time. It's like, oh, let me address this because y'all sitting up there making up laws and this sounds crazy, right? So I think that whatever happens, I hope Ketanji gets on. She's already been vetted as a federal justice. So that, I don't know what they could pull out the gate like she done because y'all already went through this. you know. So I don't think
well,
they
you
could
know how
have
the white supremacists are gonna be. They're gonna pull out something.
They're gonna try. I heard Tucker Carlson was talking about what was her LSAT score. Now, sorry, what was everybody else's SAT score? I said your mic is off. Yes.
No, that was my question exactly. You know, like when we look at the Supreme Court and the justice, some of the justices didn't even have law degrees. You know what I'm saying? Like these white men
never tried a case.
Set up on this council and named them Supreme Court justices. So, like, how dare, like, what was everybody else?
But it's what they do. Oh, they're not qualified. Mind you, Harvard Law, Harvard undergrad, right? Was, you know, literally like, so what does it matter what she made on the test to get into Harvard if she got in, right? Like, and graduated and went on to like pass the bar, right? So it's kind of like these dog whistles that you have to worry about. So what I'm saying is not only does she need to be on there, Biden needs to make a law where he expands the Supreme Court because we need at least 2 more people. He needs to find at least 2 more people that he knows are going to protect fundamental rights for Black people, especially in the United States. So I don't doubt that she will do that, right? But if she alone is not enough, I mean, she could, you know, vote right now any way she wants to, and it's not going to change the outcome of what we're going to have in terms of, you know, where we're standing, which is not good. So
I think when you think about the two sides of what you talking about, what Tani said, and then what you're saying, Corrie, is those are the signs of the trauma that we're experiencing as people of African descent. Like, we just basically have to like be like, well, okay, well, this is better than nothing. That's our constant choice, is not really like thoroughly vetting someone. There's not going to be someone that's an extreme leftist, like Tani was saying, that's going to be put on the Supreme Court. That's not
what is
happen.
left, though. This is why I push back on that a little bit, because I hear people say, "Oh, well, they're not leftists," right? The most left people I knew were my great grandparents, right? Like, so when people talk about that, you don't talk about that. Those stand up to white people with these same old country folk that grew their own food and talk funny, right? Like, so if you're saying left in our current political climate, that might not be left for us. Because I think that one of the things is, are you going to make sure you're about educating, feeding, making sure everybody is safe, right? Like, are you going to do that to the ends? And don't take no mess. Don't take no money from anybody else. Don't be afraid when other people step to you. Like, back to our topic, what do you know? I do know that for us, I think these labels kind of don't mean anything, because at the end of the day, is this Black woman here gonna make sure if you bring reparations in front of her, would she vote for it? I think she would, right? Now, it doesn't mean that it'll pass, because we have 3 branches of government, and I want people to understand that. But if it comes down to putting your opinion on something based on law, you talk about being on land that is owned by, that is land of these native peoples. The Supreme Court, right before the Indian removal, said that the Cherokee were absolutely sovereign. They won their Supreme Court case, right? The law agreed with them. The white people had no cause to be on their land. But the governor of Georgia said, all right, well, you won the Supreme Court, but now you got to enforce it, because what I'm going to tell all these white people is they can come take your land. And that, as a matter of fact, I'm going to tell them to start just rolling over here, moving you out your house, by any means necessary. So they won their Supreme Court case. And it wasn't the fact that you had racists on there, because they were settled with it. But if you have, like I said, 3 branches of government, if the executive branch says, okay, so what? We're not going to buy that.
What you're saying, though, Corrie, I think that this can roll us into the conversation for today. And I also want to tie this in and pay attention to what's going on the other side of the world in Ukraine, because I do think it's important for us to be able to think about things from a geopolitical perspective. And let me point this out. So we said the title of our talk today is Other Ways of Knowing. And so, Estee, you gave the subtitle is How You Know What You Know. Tell me the subtitle.
Is When You Know That You Know, right? So The subtitle is a reference to, I'm going to say African American folk talk because the way my grandmama would say it is, sometimes you just know that you know that you know, right? So there's a way that we can know what's true that isn't an intellectual way of knowing. It can be ancestral or embodied or familial or cultural, or you know what I mean? It's the way that I know when it smells a particular way that my peas might be about to burn. That's not an intellectual way of knowing. But there are these other ways, these other epistemologies, right, that serve and support our lives that that play a part in how we show up and who we are. And so I definitely think this connects to what we're talking about because it helps us to locate ourselves. Because there's a reason why Corrie's saying I think she might just vote for reparations, right? That ain't got nothing to do with her record. So I think that absolutely, it's these other ways of knowing contribute to who we are and how we show up, and then how we are able to identify, and it supports our analysis and how we identify what's happening.
But do you know she's gonna vote for reparations?
You don't.
No.
But what I do know is that you got a black
Hold on a second, Corrie. No. But there is, so I think the point is in that is we don't know what any of us are going to do at any time.
No.
But what we do know is, like Corrie said, we 6 down at this point. And what I know that I know, if I probably said it wrong, is that continuing on this path is going to be problematic for us. And so at this point, somebody got to be in there that's going to be different than the choices that are going to cause more problems for us. And I think that is part of this conversation, because one of the things that I was laughing at is that when Estee sent me the subtitle for today, I changed it because I was like, oh, that's grammatically incorrect. And then everybody on our chat was like, no, that's correct. That's our language. And I had not heard anyone say that out loud, but I had that experience over and over and over again. For example, I was talking to my daughter the other day, and I made chepujin, which is the national dish of Senegal. And so I make this dish. This is the first time I'm making it myself. And she says, oh, I think it would be good if you put crab in it. And I was like, you can't put crab in that. And she said, how do you know? I just know that. I just know. Spirit just said, no, you can't put crab in that. And she was like, really? And I said, yeah. And what I appreciated is that she just accepted that. I said, I don't know. Spirit told me that is not a dish. There's something about the science of that. I don't understand it, but Spirit told me you can't add crab to that dish. And I think that's what happens for us all the time, but we don't necessarily listen to it.
And I think that's real important, and it brings into mind to African cultural continuities. And my class, they're really, really always, floored when I tell them that the actual hand on your hips, the akimbo stance, comes from a ritual from the Congo. And the movement of the head like this was from a ritual dance calling down the war deities. So when you see a Black woman doing this and all this, it actually comes from a dance that we're doing to call down the spirits to give us the energy and the power and the strength to fight, and things like when my grandmother.
We may have forgotten all of that, but we know.
We know when you see somebody like this, you know what that energy is, and you know what you know. And you said, because when I went to Kenya, I didn't speak a word of Kiswahili. It was my first day in the country. We were on the matatu, and I saw a Kenyan woman doing this to somebody, and I was like, "Oh, that person is in trouble." And the white people say, "How do you know?" I say, because I know what that means. I know somebody is getting told out about something, because I know what I know, and I know that I'm going to walk around that person when I get off the bus.
And even I wanted to circle back just to Ukraine for a minute, because when people say, well, I don't know anything about that area of the country, I don't know, I can't really call it, it looked like something happening, but whose side you saying stuff, is it both propaganda? You know, and I saw, it was somebody from Kenya, I think it was a prime minister, he was like, anybody who knows what imperialism looks like, and I'm going to put this in a colloquialism, what habitual line stepping looks like, right? It's Africa. He's like, not a country on this continent was made up by us, right? So we know everything about people want to come here, want to redraw our boundaries, want to say that they own us, want to say language, but y'all ain't asking us for, for our expertise, because we can tell you what to do, because we've been through this. We still going through it. Right? So we recognize what this is, but y'all wanted to play with it. You wanted to act like, oh, of course these two white people won't go to war with each other. I'm sure he just saying something. It can't be. They're like, look at us, right? Like, it's like when it comes to greed, we know. And I was feeling like this is one of those kind of questions. We doubted what history told us, what all these people who've been conquered and colonized told us. And we were acting like, oh, not in this year, 2022, but white people living good. They ain't about to start no war over nothing about some Ukraine, and they want to annex with that. What we tell y'all, right? Like, so it might not be about us, but they're going to quickly make it about us, right? And make it about this kind of idea is like, are we going to still back imperialism, colonization, right, in 2022? And look at the way they're treating the Africans who are in the country.
They're trying to go over it.
Right, but that all speaks to what this is, I think, behind. So
what I think is interesting is, like, as soon as it went down, I was like, okay, I don't know anything, but I know sociopaths when I see them, and I know Putin is a sociopath, number one, because he was hooked up with the sociopath that was here. Number two. And number three, like, I know what capitalism looks like, imperialism, when I know what greed looks like. And so for you to roll up on somebody else's country and think that it is logical that you start bombing people and killing people because you want somebody else's country, something wrong with you. Like, what I look like? I'm gonna come to your house, Kaumba, and I'll be like, oh, what I like what's going on over here, because you got this like nice like craft room, and so I'm gonna roll up there and bomb y'all because I want your craft room.
And think how many times in history white people done that. Well, let me roll up on you. What you doing?
But
right? Like, just minding my black business. That's what I'm doing. But here we are dealing with the same kind of mindset. So
yeah, but I think he was trying to say, and he's trying to push it over, that he's trying to bring Ukraine back, because at one point Ukraine used to be a part of the countries that, made up the USSR. I think it was 13 countries, and they're trying to get the oil and all that type of stuff. So in his mind, like you said,
we want everything back that belongs to us. How about that?
He's trying to justify it, but that's crazy.
If we're going to bite, well, then Texas needs to go straight back to Mexico. I'll give them away. They need to go. Is that what we doing? Let's do it.
Is that what we doing? We need to get back all the land.
All the key word here is oil.
All the land.
If that's what we doing, we gonna do it. Let's do that.
We're gonna do it all the way. Is that how we doing it?
And so, of course, my thing is, here, this is what I know, that I know whatever y'all say. So y'all just laugh at me. This is what I know, is that when I listen to the news in the U.S., I am not getting the story. So the first thing that I did is I said, well, let me start texting and talking to my people in different countries. And so I got a colleague over in Portugal. I was like, okay, so what's up with the Ukraine thing? Then I get the real story of what's happening. And the thing he's pointing out, he said, well, part of the issue is NATO. So you got all of these countries that are surrounding Russia now that are NATO countries. And Putin not trying to have Ukraine be part of NATO. Oh, I get it. And the thing that he said that I think was key, he said, this is essentially the devil and his brother at war. All right. That's all I needed. Thank you. Thanks for the announcement.
They about to try to take us all to hell with them. So my thing is, what we supposed to do? We're just trying to live our
Pray.
lives. I think about all
Pray.
of those the African students in both Russia and Ukraine just trying to get an education because they can't get it in whatever their native country. They're not trying to be there. All the East Asians, all the people who are just literally went to them coal behind countries because they think that there are some kind of way
minding their black business.
minding their black business. Right? So we act like, yeah, okay, when you deal with the devil, right? Like you have to deal with what comes with it. And so it is not, and this is my personal opinion. So I don't think we could just let it alone. And it's unfortunate. I wish we could be like, oh, that's y'all, that's white people's problem. Or even the United States could be like, y'all gone. Because I guarantee you, if we sit back and let him take over this, they will take over, and including Africa. They already have, they're training soldiers there. They're sending military. And it's not to say that it always has to be bad, but they're doing that in order to increase the empire. You think that they just want to have the Soviet Union just be where it was? No, they're talking about expanding it, including other areas, including, places where there is no free press, no freedom of speech. So all these other kind of things that we act like we care about, even though we still don't have those things either, not all the way, but we also, what would happen to the last person who ran against Vladimir Putin for president?
Girl.
Exactly.
And he's doing stuff so he can be in power until 2036.
It's like, and then the person that tries to run against him, he just poisons them, he kills them, he jails them. They do that in Africa too, with shout out Museveni and Dagon Kagame and everybody else, all that kind of that wants to put themselves in for life. But my thing is that you talk about trying to put it, trying to stop like imperialism and exploitation and modern day slavery and all this other kind of stuff that's happening. They're making sure with their brothers up in Russia that never happens. And like I said, I do not feel like it's something, if we even want to act like we on the right side of history this one time, because we have been on the wrong side 99.9% of the time. But if we can be wrong and right sometimes, because sometimes, like I said, we already the devil. So what we got to do is kind of just work with what we got. We already in now. Well, I do think that we have to push people to, do one thing that
at this point,
to me seems to be the right.
Well, who is the we?
I was gonna say you got the wrong pronouns.
Yeah, because
look here, I will be minded by black business. I don't know if I told you that, but what I was saying is that the U.S. industrial complex, which is already formed, they need to do what they do. That's what I'm saying.
Let Thandisizwe say.
If we talk about we know how we know what we know the U.S. is going to be on the wrong side. We not necessarily going to be on the wrong side, but the U.S. government is going to be on the wrong side. The government, not our government, the government is going to be on the wrong side.
Now, my question for y'all.
Historically.
So in that, Thandi, address this. My question for y'all is, why is everybody worried about Ukraine? Because about 3 coups done popped off on the continent of Africa. Ain't nobody saying nothing about that.
Hello. All of this stuff is happening.
But partly because what is the media focusing on right now?
In Southeast Asia. So we still got a coup
with
an illegal government in South Asia.
The media is focusing on Ukraine and wants you to see Russia as the bad guy, which you don't need to see that because the U.S. says it. You can figure that out on your own. We always want to root for somebody. We don't need to root for Ukraine or Russia. We need to be concerned about NATO. We need to be concerned about AFRICOM. We need to be concerned about those students. We need to be concerned about imperialism in general. So how we know, we already know that we know that we know that. We know that. We know that, and then we get a lot of times allow the frenzy to take us off what we already know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what I was going to say earlier, I don't have the analysis, but you can get some analysis from the Hood Communist, from Black Alliance for Peace, from the Black Agenda Report, from Riot Starter TV, Brother Kalanji, interviewing Brother Daruba Ben Wahad, longtime struggler, Black Panther Party, BLA soldier, talking with Ajamu Baraka, executive director of Black Alliance for Peace. Margaret Kimberly and the Black Agenda Report have always been holding it down for us, have always held it down. Hood communists, new on the scene, got kicked off Twitter, but they on IG, they got a blog. You can look up Hood communists. You're going to find out there the analysis that we as African people need to internalize and promote in terms of what's happening right now. So no to AFRICOM, no to NATO.
Like I said, like you did right. Ask people that you know in other countries, also, right? That might not be produced news, but you can kind of get what's happening on the street, right? And sometimes that's really important too.
Well, and I think also it's important for us to remember from a psychological perspective that we don't have to root for a particular side. We didn't choose to be in this country. Our ancestors didn't choose to be in this country. We happen to be United States citizens as a result of birth. And we don't always have to be like, well, not always. We don't have to root for things that we know are wrong. I have colleagues that say that they're pacifists, or you looking at stuff and know like, okay, this is problematic, because there's also stuff. There was a piece from The Nation that I haven't gotten through yet, where they were looking at some of the neo-Nazis that had infiltrated Ukraine over the years. So there's a whole background that we have to see. And for us, what is important for us to understand, and this to me is from an African-centered worldview, is how does this impact people of African descent from a global perspective? And why is this country considered sacred? It should be saved. Why isn't Myanmar? Why isn't all the other countries that have experienced coups within the last year? Why aren't the people in those countries also considered sovereign and sacred? And why aren't they worthy of help? That tells you a lot about the agenda of this world from a global perspective.
Because at this point, Ukraine has something that the U.S. wants, right? Yeah, it has oil. It has that valuable resource that they want, right? If you look at a place, the countries in Africa, they have some things, but not as much. They'll step into any countries when it serves their agenda. And we know this. Like you said, they're always looking out for their best interests. So, that could be one of the reasons why.
And I was talking to my students about this. Environmentalism really is not just about, can you save trees? And, even it is literally about democracy. It's anti-imperialist. Because what you can't tell somebody is that they slap a solar panel on top of their car, that they can't go nowhere. You can't tell them if you say, I'm going to control the oil that is slapped on top of it, that you have to use to fund the car. So I was like, the Middle East and Russia act like they could do whatever they want based on the fact that they have oil. And we've let them, right? So all of this kind of like, oh, are you going to get an electric car? I was like, it's beyond that. It's beyond, it's whether, and I talk about what you know, right? Back to my great-grandparents, right? I feel like we did not learn lessons that were very simple about resource, supply and demand, and how you cannot wait for white people for nothing, right? And I think that the same thing. I think about, if you'll appreciate this. I was talking, like in the age of Ida B. Wells, right? You talking about, in the early 1900s, they had yellow fever. Then they had the Spanish flu. They had wars. They had literal, race riots, like from, all the 1910s. They went off to World War I. Like they had war, pandemic, racial strife. Women couldn't vote. People just they burning down whole towns. Like we talked about Oscarville, I think, before. All this other kind of stuff. And what were my Black ancestors doing in South Carolina? One, they grew their own food. Because what they realized is you can't be worried about going to the grocery store when they go jack up prices and be like, oh, I can't eat. Or you have to worry about getting somewhere. You need to be self-sufficient. question. You need to not worry about who got some energy. Well, of course, they didn't have no electricity, but you know what I'm saying. You can't be worried about, oh, well, I can't turn on my gas stove, or I can't do we know how to take some wood, put it in a fire pit? My cousin knows how to do this. She made grits, steak, and eggs all on a fire out in the backyard. And I was like, where did you learn how to do that? I was like, them grits is good and the steak is good. The eggs are perfect. Off of like some wood, and she put a flat piece of aluminum. I was like, this is what I need to know. This is what we all need to know. If you ain't got no stove, can you go back, get stuff out your yard, throw it on the fire, and cook it? We can, right? But they knew you had to do that. They knew how to cure people and keep people from getting disease, right? They were like, I know what they saying, but listen, this is what I'm about to do. You about to eat this root? This is what you about to do? And, whatever. We're going to wrap you up, put you out in the sun, whatever we do. But we act like we can't know that. And partly it is just our belief that people who tell us that what we know, we don't know it, right? They call it a question, well, oh, that might be cute, what y'all were doing. But did you really understand what, I don't know where Estee went. Well, what that meant, right? Mm-hmm. Or they want to talk about, the fancy way of saying it is epistemologies. Well, what epistemology, your ways of knowing, your theory about knowledge. I mean, is that a standard and a acceptable epistemology? Who cares? Right? Did it work for my grandparents? Did it work for them? And it will work for us. But we, like I said, don't. So we know what to do about war and rumors of war and pandemics and high gas prices. We already know, but the question is, will we do it? So.
And I think to kind of feed off of what Corrie was saying a little bit, I think one of the challenges that African people face in terms of knowing now is because we are disconnected in a lot of ways from our environment. We are disconnected from our healings. Now, just imagine all of us up here, spiritual healers and priests, if all of a sudden they decide to shut the liquor store down, how you gonna make your offering? If your ancestors need gin.
I know one of y'all know how to make wine. I know it in my soul. I don't know which one
for you. I'll have the gin and the beer ready for you. But on a fundamental level, you have to think about it in that way, that they can hold our spiritual practices hostage. They already separated us from the land, from knowing what herb to give somebody, like Corrie said, how to wrap them up in the sun. So we need to go back to trusting ourselves to try to be more in line and in tune with our environment and with the ways and the places that we live. Even if you live in an urban city, it's a way that you can connect, because when we disconnect from the larger scheme of things, when we disconnect from the whole, our ways of knowing is impacted. So people don't know what they know that they don't know, that they shouldn't be really rooting for Ukraine, and that there is not necessarily a good or bad guy. You see what I'm saying? Because those things aren't clear, and they just go into what's being fed to them, as opposed to trusting their intuition and their knowledge.
And that's what I was saying to you earlier when I was saying that my daughter was saying, well, can we put crab in this? And I said, no. And I didn't know why, but my intuition, my knowing knew that wasn't going to be something, not just like, oh, it's not going to taste good. Like, no, that actually might make you sick if you do that. And I think it's important for us to develop or nurture those ways of knowing, where you don't have to you ain't got to be on Instagram, or you ain't got to look in a book, but your ancestors speak through you. Your intuition tells you. So if you out, like you said, Corrie, your family, you know how to make somebody healthy, or, when they get sick, or what herbs to use. Because sometimes they're just not a manual, but you need to know whether or not this is the thing that you need to do.
Yeah, but it's so interesting about the garden thing. I don't really tend my garden. I have one, but ask me what's growing in it, and do I rotate crops? Do I put greens one time, come back or something? I don't do none of that. So obviously nothing is growing. But it's I do know what they did, right? And I feel like I'm probably the last generation that does, and I even don't practice what I know. And so I wonder what is going to happen as the people who do know, don't necessarily practice. Because like, even if you're in Brooklyn, you could have a pot, you could grow stuff on your terrace, right? Like it is not to say that is not even growing stuff is not available to you, because it is. But I think
So
we
I
also
have a question for you, for each of you. How do you know when you know?
Oh, wow, that's a good question.
You going?
Estee.
It's just something that's just so fundamental, right? You don't know or pay attention to how you breathe. It's just something that happens. You trust the process. And when I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, when those sparks of inspiration comes, I definitely know that, it is from God, or it's the knowledge from the ancestors. And if I'm ever in doubt, then I'll just go to my shrines to verify. And they'll tell me, oh, this is, and then I think that's important, because a lot of times when people go to diviners, right? The diviners can have divine inspiration, but that may not necessarily be something that's coming from the ancestors of God. And I think a lot of times we kind of underscore and we underplay divine inspiration. So I know the way that I was taught in my tradition, whenever doing divination or anything for anyone, I was like, okay, is this me or is this God speaking? Because you have to be clear. And if you do that enough, then you'll start to say, okay, I can see what's me, what's the ancestors, what's the voodoo, you know, and then that way could be, because there are tales that you'll know. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I
Yep.
was actually going to say the same thing. Maybe even a little more detailed. I think your differentiation is really critical, right? Because when we're talking about other ways of knowing, even that are not intellectual or westernized, or ways that are culturally prioritized, right? Because we like scientific knowledge, we like um, we like these kinds of measurable ways of intellectual knowing. But I would say even outside of that, there's embodied knowledge, right? There are some things that come from our body. Our bodies are sacred vessels that have agency as well. I don't think that's necessarily ancestral, but it can be, right? So there are ways that who we are exists on a continuum, and it's not in isolation, but also is its own entity. And so it's important to be able to know what's your Ori, or what's your own spirit, what's God, what's your grandmama, what's your cultural knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know I'm not washing no clothes on the first day of the year. I'm not washing clothes on the first day of the year. And that's not coming from my body. That's not coming from my Ori. There's no divine revelation, right? My grandma ain't wash clothes. I ain't washing clothes, right? It's a bad idea, you know? And that's still sacred knowledge. I know the explanations that she offered. I know that that's different from what my daddy said, which is different from what my auntie said, and they were all her children. But I trust that there is a cacophony of sacred knowledge that is speaking to and ringing out of. And so I practice that because I trust the cacophony, right? But that is not my own spirit. That's not intuition. That's a different way of knowing. And so I mean, so I think really getting into the many ways of knowing is really its own conversation, and maybe even a different kind of spiritual walk. But I think for the sake of this conversation, for me, what's important is I was a person who I was naturally an intellectual child. I was a person who wasn't taught to trust my own way of knowing. I had to come back to myself. I had to return back to even as a person of spiritual power. I was raised in the Christian church, and I was raised in an environment where boys were prioritized if they had spiritual power, and where women were told that they couldn't preach. and where you know, like having any kind of, and it was recognizable and palpable to people, and they were relegated to, oh well, maybe you're supposed to be somebody's first lady because you just got a special anointing, right? And I was never that person. I was 3-year-olds telling people that I was gonna marry Mr. Dillard, and clearly that I meant something by that, saying how I'm not gonna have nobody's husband. Thank God for my spouse. So my point is, I think that for me, it was really trusting that the first time. And I remember when it was a big deal was when I was a teenager and I knew that I needed to go to Spelman, and that was the only place that I was going to apply. And everybody in my life, including my favorite history teacher who offered me a detention slip, or I should apply to another school because she was like, this is not logical. You don't apply to one school. Like, what happens if you don't get in? You know that your life is based on this collegiate path. You know what I mean? And I was like, I'm going to Spelman. And that was all I had. And when that feeling returns to my body, to my spirit, to my mind, when that experience returns to me, after having that experience of trusting it and it working out and knowing that it came from nowhere, it helps me to return back to it over time. So I think, you know, there are different ways of us experiencing and knowing that, but you have to learn the delineation, and you have to find where it has home in you.
And I agree. I mean, I think that asking is the beginning of any kind of knowledge, and no matter what it is, right? Like, I think that you legit have to want to know something, right? Like, and whether you in your mind ask your grandmother, like who's deceased, like, or how do I do this? Or I literally ask my grandmother all the time. Like, I was telling Ife, like, the last election, I'm like, well, who's gonna win? Is it going, well, the one before? Well, all of them, right? Particularly the last one, Joe Biden and whatever. And she was like, it's gonna be all right. You just wait. And I was like, well, it ain't looking good right here, right? Like, so, but my thing is, and it was, and my friend from California called me. I was like, Warnock's gonna win. So both of them gonna win. Joe Biden's gonna win. She was like, how can you be so sure? I was like, I don't know. I just know it. Right? And she called me with that. Well, she was like, you the only person that said they had it locked down, that you had no doubt. I asked you at the beginning, I asked you at the end, and you still said this. I was like, well, that wasn't me saying this. But my thing is if you ask, I knew if I asked whatever source, like sometimes I could even ask, just like, do I think I should do this? Should I apply for this job? Should I go, or should I go to Spelman? And you all receive in your spirit or whatever. Every time you see somebody with Spelman on their car, drive by, you see all this stuff happen. You're like, I think that's the only place I'm going to go. So why should I? It's when you start doubting where I think all of that other kind of stuff comes in. I think people are easily led astray. They start wanting to listen to other people for answers. They go to Mother Google. Mother Google will lead them astray. But I think you have to be Google. Well, that's what they call it. That's how they treat it. But I think that one of the things that you could have Google, but I think that if you aren't clear about what you're asking and what the answer looks like, that you can be easily led astray because anything can come up. But what I do think is that what is the truth will come up over and over again. Like, it'll be reinforced. Like, I bring up my grandmother a lot. Like, she was wrong about a lot. Let's be clear. Like, she was born in 1911. She had very problematic opinions about a lot of things. But there were things that when I knew that I asked her about, that she definitely knew. And I knew that too. So I was like, oh, you know what? She might not like Mr. Willard for some stupid reason because of something he did back in 1945 that's dumb. But when I asked her about this other thing, about, how I should treat my education or where I should do, I believe her on it, right? And you can, like I said, and then what would happen is that would be repeated other places. Like, I would get confirmation that was the case. So.
I think... Estee, what you said about not having that intuition nurtured, I think that's something I want to spend the last part of our time talking about, because I think that that's something that we all struggle with. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I certainly was not taught to trust my intuition. I got lots of messages growing up that I didn't know what I was talking about, you know, and just to doubt myself. And particularly, this is the one of the gifts that I have is cheating men, to be able to spot them. And I remember with my ex-husband, he said I was negative because like a man would come in the room, like we were in our early 20s and I don't know. And I remember a man walking in the room and I was like, oh, he's a cheater. He was like, you're just being negative, but I was right.
That's self-preservation.
That was
you never heard anybody say, especially with that issue, that they should.
Girl, people need to use you to introduce them to people. But
that's a valuable.
I know when I was growing up that we have and we still do, the tradition of talking about our dreams the night before. And so we would get up at the table and it's like, okay, if it's a good dream, you can tell it before breakfast because it'll come true. If it's not a good dream, you can, you know, you have to eat breakfast first and then you'll talk about it. So in talking about those dreams, you know, the women in the family will pull out signs. I was like, oh, I dreamed about a road. Oh, girl, that means you going on the trip. What else did you see? I saw a blue car. That means your Uncle Pookat is going to come over and he's going to take you somewhere. So they, you know, sat there and they analyzed all of the stuff and they made it seem like it was normal and it was natural. And another thing that happened a lot in my family, and this is a rank in voodoo called the Amagasi, is that they would talk to dead people all the time. And it was fine for you to see ghosts. And I know when Waithe first, that was my husband, first came to my house, the next day my aunt came over and she was like, oh, I was talking to Poochie last night. And my mom was like, oh yeah, what'd he say? Oh, he said this and he told me to tell you hi. And Waithe was like, is there another Poochie in your family? I was like, oh no, she's talking about that one. He said, I thought Poochie died about 5. I was like, yeah, he did. And it was normalized that they talked about it. And then it was like, oh, he told me to make sure to tell Tony, don't go hanging around such and such. So those things are accepted. Even now, when things go wrong in my family, my brother will call and say, pray for me. You know, I need you to go to the shrine. And my cousins and my nieces and nephews, I need you to go to the shrine on this. I need you to do this. Because of the way that my grandmothers and aunts were, we really encouraged those types of things. And my grandmother actually didn't see any contradiction with going to church and then cutting some chickens. She didn't see any contradictions with that. And there's plenty of stories that my mom and aunts and uncles have about her with live births and all of this stuff. And this is the last thing I'm gonna say. I remember when I first started doing offerings and my mom was over at my house and she was outside of the shrine room. And she heard me like really struggling with the chicken and she was trying to watch TV and she was like, do you need me to come in there and do it for you? I was like, oh my God. Because you seem like you're having a hard time. And I was like, I got them. You don't even know what you're doing, so whatever. But it's always been that type of thing. So, you know, the doubt came in when I started to, and I guess it's the opposite for me when I tried to intellectualize it. And when I started to, you know, listen to other people to say, okay, well, maybe that's not spirit. Maybe you crazy. Maybe something else is going on. And then I went through a period where I started to doubt my gifts that I had to turn around and, you know, reaffirm it again. But that's my experience.
And I have one book recommendation, sorry, because, you know, I'm talking about intellectualizing stuff, but it's called Talking to the Dead by LaRonda Manigault Bryant. It's excellent, but it's about Gullah Geechee women and creativity, basket making, you know, all the song, quilt making, all that kind of stuff, and cooking. But it is about really how that is embedded into like praise house traditions, hush harbor traditions, etc. Very good. Anyway.
When I was living there.
Thank you. I'm gonna get that book.
Corrie, say that again, the name of the book?
Talking to the Dead.
Okay.
I will show it to you if I talked about it in Brazil, I think. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was living there in Atlanta, I met an elder by the name of Metahochi. He was an elder in African traditional religions, one of the pioneers in this country. But Metahochi was also a student of history. a student of world religions and had great respect for many of them. And one of the things that he would say a lot, he had a great respect for Sufism and the Muslims in Senegal. And he would say this saying, and I never remember how to say it in Wolof. And I always get angry about that. I can't remember the saying to save my life. But in English, you know how Muslims always say, Inshallah, if Allah is willing. He said in Senegal, they say, if Allah wills it, if Allah doesn't will it, it's going to happen. And so when it comes to culture, when it comes to your culture and who you are, African people have culture and we do other religions, which is why so many of our ancestors and elders saw no problem with doing chickens and going to church. Who you are, your culture is how you view the world and how you do things. And in our world, we have a sixth sense. We've got the five senses: taste, touch, smell, etc. Which is why Estee knows when she smells a certain smell in beans is probably burning. But we also have that intuition. That's a sense that's cultivated. So intuition, in addition to what you call on in terms of the ancestors or who is this particular, is this God, is this the ancestors, is this my grandma, my mima? Those are also cultivated with it. They exist, should I say, they exist, and we either allow them to atrophy or we cultivate them. And so most of us here are all initiates of African traditional religion. So we got a bunch of other things going on. But in terms of how do you know what you know, you get confirmation in a dream. And you might not say it to nobody else, but you know what it was about. Or you're driving and you see something. Okay, and then you keep on driving. You don't say nothing to nobody. You get a thought in your head or you hear something. And of course you don't say nothing because you've been doing that, and people say, you might go need to see somebody about that. Because it's not Western knowledge, it's not valued in the Western canon. They think you crazy. Which is why you look up Malidoma Patrice Somé and you see one of the people he was introduced to was a young man who was schizophrenic, who eventually became a priest. Because one of the ways that they know a person is marked for priesthood is that they become bothered by certain things, meaning that a deity wants that person to serve them. A deity wants them to become a priest, or that person might need a particular initiation or something traditional to assist them. There are the other ways of knowing that that complement the things that you already know. They bring credibility to the tactile things that you already know, the practical things that you already know. It's like you get spiritual confirmation of your material reality. That's what that's how I know some things sometimes. If I Not that the material reality validates it, but the spiritual reality validates it. It's like, okay, I knew that was right. I knew I should have went that way instead of this way. I knew I shouldn't have let that Negro in my house. I knew I should not have done that. I knew that. And so,
and,
those are the kinds of things
and
that
I
I'm talking about.
and I'm so grateful for what everybody's saying so far. Um, but we will just add, in addition to what Tandy said, I want to also add the narrative that when we are introduced to spirit, that it doesn't always have to be traumatic. Lately, when I'm hearing all these spiritual healers and all the stuff that they talk about, they was like, well, I was on my deathbed and I saw a vision of Ogun and it's told me I had to get initiated. Or I was suffering from stage 18 cancer. And then all of a sudden, Mommy Water came and she healed me and I became a priestess. Everybody's experience isn't like that. My introduction to the spirit was beautiful and gentle and loving and illuminating. I didn't have any life threatening illness. I didn't have any torment. I didn't have any of those things. So, in addition to what you said, I want us to start talking about positive stories where spirits touch us in a beautiful way, and not just through trauma, because I think some of that is reflective of how we are as a people, that sometimes we have to think those things exist. I just wanted to add that.
No, no,
Thank
no.
you.
It could have been the way that I was presenting
No,
it.
it wasn't you. It was just something that sparked
Oh,
in my mind that I've been having conversations with people a lot lately.
but yes, so, absolutely. There is the issue of trauma sometimes, but there's also the issue of just how we have been trained to relate to things, or we have not been trained to relate. It has not been cultivated in us. So we're like, what's going on? What is this? And one of the things I remember very, very vividly, I have a sister friend out here in LA. She was telling me about her high school sweetheart. They had been boyfriend and girlfriend in high school. They had 3 children together. And she would tell me about how he would see spirits and didn't know how to deal with it. She's like, he would come in the room and be like, who is that? She's like, who? You don't see that person sitting over there? She was like, no. He's like, okay, and go out the room and go get drunk. Because we're not familiar with that, or the way that we have been taught to deal with it is this is wrong. I had a Sunday school teacher when I was a child. If it wasn't Jesus, it was the devil. Bottom line. If it wasn't Jesus, it was the devil. Anything.
DEBIL.
Anything. The devil. The DEBIL. The devil. It didn't matter what it was. As long as it wasn't Jesus, it was the devil. So, the way that we come into contact with our traditional ways of knowing, the ways that they are reintroduced to us, it impacts us. Absolutely.
So what Nozibele said reminded me that I didn't say why I was excited about, I'm going to say soon to be Justice Jackson, right? And it is for me connected to this conversation because there's just and so maybe I'm siding with Corrie on this, right? But there's just something about when I look at that Black woman and when I saw her stand behind that podium. Now she married to who she married to, and she has the track record that she has, and I'm just being my host, right? So I see those things, and I recognize that they are what they are. But the way she stood behind that podium, and I saw her settle and her legs, you watch the tape. I know she still know where she come from, right? And I know that she still know who her grandmama is. I know that she still remembers that her daddy left school to figure out this law thing, and that it totally shifted her consciousness around what it meant to be a Black person in America outside of just her family perspective. And for a Black woman who has that, notwithstanding the other thing, Ashe, but for a Black woman who has that to go sit and take up space among supreme justices, it is a celebration because we have not breached that barrier yet. And that's an office that Black women are still serving them lunch with. I ain't got to be there to know that's happening either. And for them to go and greet that sister, and I know that she's going to respond to them in kind because of who she is, I celebrate that.
And so, okay, and I know we're out of time. But okay, so I just have to make a comment about that. So I get excited about that. Then I go back to, there was this brother that I went to. I started out in community college. That was there. Can't think of the brother's name, but he was problematic in a lot of ways. But I think he said something that I thought was important. And he was like, and I was offended by this, but he would say, like, you can't just root for all Black people because not all Black people are rooting for us, essentially. That's what he was saying. And so I can get excited about Justice Jackson, but at the same time, when you look at someone like, I'm not going to say no ugly words, Clarence Thomas, who comes from like poor Black Gullah Geechee communities, from these small island communities, and has done so. He's experienced all of what it means to be Black, and I would argue in even a different way, in a more oppressed way, and has single-handedly, in his role on the Supreme Court, done harm, and systematic harm, to reverse what Justice Thurgood Marshall did when he was on the court. It makes me hesitant to root, like our sister would say, rooting for everybody that's Black. I'm not gonna root for everybody that's Black.
And even Hill told you that. And even Hill said, this Black man ain't for y'all, right? Like, he will hurt us. And what our problem is that we have to recognize when Black women, and I think this is the difference, and I'm not saying Clarence Thomas, and this is not man-hating, it's not whatever, but oftentimes the truth tellers, the people who are closer to their intuition, are women. And we should have immediately said, wait, this man ain't worth jack, and he gonna sit up here and be one way and say this and act like he didn't try to do all this stuff to me. We should have all said, you know what, Black women is always right. Like, if that's what she said he is, that's what he is. That's what he did, that's what he did. And so what I'm doing is that in the legacy of Anita Hill is really where I'm sitting, Ketanji Jackson. And I saw something where she was talking about how she, not that this vindicates her, but she does feel like it doesn't end her story where it ended, which was she tried to say something against Clarence Thomas and whatever the U.S. did, what the U.S. did anyway. So I feel like it is another part of this story. I mean, Anita Hill, who's still a legal professor, right? Like, that is what she does, trying to train the next generation. I do feel like it is part of that.
And on that note, I know we do need to stop, so I want us to have our closing words. So, what do you want people to take away from just this idea of knowing what you know when you know that you know that you're supposed to know that you know?
I'm a quote my grandmama on this. My grandmama said, "Your first mind is the spirit." So, what your first mind tells you, your first mind. Whatever come up first, and it's from you, right? It's not doubt, it's not negative self-talk, it's not, even with this. I ain't studying Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas ain't Justice Jackson. I ain't studying him. That ain't what I'm talking about. I ain't talking about him.
Ain't studying him. Nothing about him got nothing to do with
like, I'm not finna let Clarence occupy space in my celebrating her either. I'm not talking about him. I'm not worried about him.
Amen. Ashe, inshallah, so be it, and so it is.
She said, Ashe, inshallah, so be it, and so it is.
What crazy.
My first mind said, when I saw that Russia and Ukraine stuff, I said, now this is some sociopathic imperialism. That's my...
Ashe and inshallah today.
Inshallah. I think one of the takeaways that I would like to offer is to continue to trust your intuition. And even if you are wrong, that's okay. I think a lot of times people, it's like how we were saying earlier, I should have known not to let him in my house. You have to be wrong sometimes because you need a baseline, right? And you need to know, no, seriously, you need a baseline to know, okay, I know last time how I felt and I ignored it, so what I should do next time. So don't be afraid to fail with your, with your intuition. Don't be afraid to be wrong, but always trust what she said or he said, right? And then just move on. And if you're wrong, forgive yourself and then just do it again.
Yes, continue to move on. Gather up all your facts. Gather your facts. Yeah. And one of your fact finders is your intuition, and make your move. And like you said, sometimes you're going to be wrong, and that's okay.
And I would say it's not wrong, though, because, and this is why I say this. I mean, I think we can be clearer at times than others, right? Like, and I feel like, the onus on us is to get clearer. And we do. As we age, we get clear about some things that we might not have known, right, before. Because I'm sure, even in your 20s, you might have recognized it. But for the women who didn't recognize cheaters, I bet you they do now, right? But does that mean that they act on it? Sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes like, girl, what's the blue song say? I can have a piece of a man if I no, not at all. Like, so for some people, that's what they about to do, right? Like, they literally, like, this is all, I understand it, I see it. Hush, what did Billie Holiday say? Don't explain. Like, you just gonna be in what you about to do. But this is what I wanted to say, that I think we have a problem with time, right? Like, we'll think that because we're supposed to do something, because we know that this is supposed to happen, that if it doesn't happen immediately, we think that means it's not supposed to happen, right? Like, but I think that again is a European way of time telling, and then for us, if you believe something's going to happen, it's going to happen, right? Like, it may not be on the timeline, and that's another grandmama saying, it may not come when you want it, right? But it'll be there right on time, right?
He's always on time.
Right. But I think that for us, it is when doubt, when question, whatever, like, you think you're supposed to be an anthropologist. Well, you didn't get into the school, you did something else, you had a baby, whatever. Okay, girl, that don't mean you ain't still supposed to be an anthropologist, right? Like, I think that we will take that to mean that, our path is something else. But it is just that, a path. So intuition is a path. Knowing is a path. I feel like I'm quoting everybody. Prophet Muhammad says, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, right? There's nobody who arrives, when they're born at the place they're supposed to be at, right? And I think that it is for us to get clearer about what that is. And I think it's available to everybody, right? That ability to be clear, to walk into knowing as you go.
And I think the power becomes when you're willing to listen to your intuition, even when you can't explain it and other people don't agree. I was talking to my realtor earlier this week, and she telling me something, and she's like, well, I think you should go in this direction. And everything that she was saying was logical. And at first I would cut her off, and I said, well, let me listen. And I listened, and I said, well, no, I'm not going to do it. I think what you're saying is logical, but I'm not going to do it for these reasons. And the bottom line is my intuition is telling me don't do that, even though everything that you're saying is logical. And I'm just like, I'm going with this. It's my decision to make. And so if it ends up being wrong, which I know this one ain't, because it's how I know my decision is right. But if it did end up being wrong, that's all right. Then later on, I go look at that and I learn some information and move on. But that's the thing. And I never even thought about that before. So Corrie, thank you for saying that. It is important to look at even the mistakes, even when you fall down, as opportunities to strengthen your intuition. It's an opportunity. That being said, y'all, I know we got to go. I forgot to introduce my folks earlier today. They tell me not to introduce them, but I think they're amazing, so I'm going to introduce them. So thank you to Associate Professor of African American Literature at Morehouse College, Dr. Corrie Claiborne. And then next to her is Professor of Anthropology and the owner of Grand Tressa Hair Products, and you see her hair is always looking fly. Sister Antoinette Kuumba Nozibele. I forget. I'm Istanbul based.
Lots of names.
And then my sister in Ifa and in Gungun, and she is also a priestess of Olokun, and she is a reverend and a queer sexologist, and that is Reverend Estee Nena Dillard. I forgot to put the EI in front of that. See, Black people got lots of names. And the one that keeps us all straight from a geopolitical perspective, she's a social commentator, she's an author and a journalist, my sister Thandisizwe Chimurenga, always hanging out with us early in the morning from California, from my home state, my home city. Thanks, sis. So y'all, remember, we are here every single first Friday having conversations from a Black perspective, from a Black womanist perspective of like all kinds of stuff, because we went from what your grandmama know from the South to Ukraine today. So hang out with us. We'll see you next month. Take care.
Bye.